Well, 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 well. We are live. It's the pre-show, WeatherBrains episode number 461 for November 24th, the week of Thanksgiving. 'Tis the season to give thanks, and we are thankful for you, brave souls that watch the pre-show. This is the time of the show where we get our act together, we share boring personal stories, and look who's here to share one. Kevin is back.
Hey, how's everybody?
So what's your boring personal story, Kevin?
Oh, it has been everything but. We're knee deep in boxes still, and Skip retired on Thursday, so now I'm all by myself in here. And but we're so happy to be here. This town, Wichita. I've moved to Wichita Falls. If anybody doesn't know, I've taken over for Skip McBride, who was the 32-year tenured chief meteorologist here. A very, very long run. And the town just could not be more welcoming. They're just nice. People come up to you and just say, we're so thankful that you're here. And, of course, that TXCN is shown up here on cable, so a number of people knew who I was. And they're just so appreciative, so welcoming. The nicest thing, it's a much smaller town than Dallas-Fort Worth. And back this spring, there were a couple days where my commute was a minimum of an hour and 15 minutes. And now it's 6.5.
Hours?
Yeah, 6.5 hours. Yeah. So that's just, gas savings alone is going to make me a rich man.
Well, Kevin, we just wanted to tell you that the occupancy at our Wichita Falls hotel has jumped since you're there, so I think it's a direct impact of you coming to town. So anyway,
people must be coming in to watch the news.
They are. They come in and just check in for 2 hours at night and go home.
That makes total sense. So there we go.
No luggage, no anything. They just come check in.
Well, now let's not go there.
Hey, Aubrey, let's check your audio. Say something to us.
Hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Perfect. Okay.
Perfect
audio. So the computer speakers, when I turned them on, they had this lovely, annoying buzz to them, and I couldn't make it stop. So our editor got me some headphones, and all is good.
Now you sound very good. Who's eating?
Me. I'm sorry, James.
Bill.
We're nosy. What are you eating? This is where we ask nosy questions.
Cheetos.
Doesn't that like get your fingers all all of your fingers?
They do, but that's all right. See if you can tell what's special about the package. Can anybody spot it?
Crunchy croquant?
Yeah, it's written in French too because I'm in Canada.
What?
Everything has to be in French too. It can't just be in English. It has to be in French also.
Are you back to Calgary?
I am back to Calgary.
Gotta love Calgary.
We passed our inspection with flying colors today, so anyway, it was a wonderful experience.
So Cheetos in French is Cheetos.
Yeah.
It's not very cold. It's like -2, -3.
Fahrenheit or Celsius?
Yeah.
Celsius, yeah, exactly. My room is set at 19.
66 degrees.
Very good, Dr. Scott. Very impressive.
You got snow on the ground up there, Bill?
There's some left over, but the snow's coming in tomorrow night. I'm trying to get out before it gets here.
Yeah, that's the one we're watching too.
I'm on the red eye getting out of here, and I'm trying to get out before it hits, and then trying to get to Asheville on Wednesday. Hopefully, in behind the first round of that system. So.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Dr. John is our official East Coast nor'easter snow correspondent.
Oh, man. All I've been doing is watching this storm today.
We want a rain-snow line. We want a start time, a stop time. We want to know airport statuses. We want to know everything. So fair warning.
Yeah, really, exactly. And a personal forecast for Asheville, North Carolina, please.
The old I-95 corridor.
Yep.
So, wow. It's like, I think, this is good. So we can actually watch Kevin work. This is cool. See, he's not listening to us. Oh, he is listening to us.
Hey, he hears you.
So
it says something's weather authority. Something S.
Texoma.
Texoma.
Yeah, Texas and Oklahoma. I'll show you a good. Can I tell you how windy it was here yesterday?
How windy was it? It was so windy.
Hey, hang on. I can't hold. Okay. But can I tell you how windy it was yesterday?
How windy
was it?
It was so windy, even the Christmas decorations were having.
Aw.
Wow.
Were they dancing in the wind?
That's
He
sad.
was just in sort of a permanent. I don't know if he was drunk or what, but he was kind of permanently in this position.
Wow. So is that in front of your TV station there?
That was Lowe's.
Oh, okay. So are you in the studio this?
Tour here.
Yeah, give us a tour. I mean, we got a couple of minutes.
Behind me is the Weather Center. We've got the Weather Central for the time being. Hint, hint.
Huh.
And then there's another part over here. Have some more computers there. And then you can see the chroma key wall in the background. And then that's an interview set there. And the main news desk is kind of behind that wall. I can't get over there because I'm wired power right now. But it's actually a nice little studio.
Cool. It looks very nice in there.
Orange
Very nice.
snakes on the ground.
Yeah, I like it.
They've actually, I shouldn't say that, but apparently we're kind of out in the field. We're at the tower site, and so it's out in the field. And from time to time, we get rattlesnakes in the building.
Ooh.
Awesome.
So that was that. They didn't mention that in the interview. So
No, they leave that part out conveniently.
yeah,
Wow.
I gotta go work here for a minute.
Okay.
All right.
I love TV and radio stations where the transmitter site and the studio are co-located, which means traditionally you're out in a cow pasture or some remote area. There was a radio station in Tuscaloosa, Alabama years ago where I used to work. I didn't work there. I worked at another station, but they were in a cow pasture, and I mean they would open the door and the cows would stick their head in there. You know, about the time
It was just them mad at you for eating hamburgers. They were Chick-fil-A cows, is all that
Yeah.
was, James.
Yeah, that was awesome. Those WJRD, Big D Country, 1150. Oh, this is great. We're on. I just noticed we're on cable television here. Kevin's there's a little latency, so Kevin's showing that Christmas decoration guy all bent over there.
Yeah.
All right. So welcome to those of you watching on cable television. We have to get somewhat serious now that you're with us. If you've never joined us before on cable, this is WeatherBrains. We do this every Monday night at 8:30 Central. And we are on our digital weather channel, which is branded as James Spann 24/7, which in itself is a very scary thought. But if you're going to get me 24/7, then you get this show. That's just part of the deal. This is for those that are new, we like to kind of explain this from time to time. WeatherBrains is really an audio podcast. We started as an audio show years ago, and we kind of ported over to television and video about 2 years ago. And I would still say maybe 60-70% of the people listen to the show. But many people do watch, and we're glad that you watch. I'm sitting in my lovely closet studio, my elegant office. Brian Peters has had the luxury tour of our little room here, haven't you?
Oh, yes, I've sat in the Chief's chair.
And by the way, I should mention this chair actually came from a storm chase vehicle. I mean, this is a nice chair.
I nearly got killed in that chair.
Yeah, but that's true. But this chair has a rich history. Bill Murray almost lost his life in this. But in the original Chaser vehicle, this big rolling executive luxurious chair was in the back of the van, and Bill was back there, which is highly illegal.
Yeah.
while we're driving. So we were driving back from Starkville, Mississippi to Birmingham, Alabama. It's only about 2 hours, but it was late at night, and they kind of changed the an intersection, and I had the decision whether to roll the van in the field, whether to go straight into the field, but somehow I kept it on the road, and in the process we looked back there, and Bill had his laptop crammed up in his nose. J.B. Elliott, who was in the passenger seat, you can still see his fingerprints where he was holding on over there. It was a magical moment. So this chair has special meaning So as we retired that Storm Chase vehicle, I had to get the chair out, and I have claimed it as my own. So, but all right, we got to get started here. Hey, Jen, can you hear us?
I can. Hello.
Okay.
Welcome, Jen.
You're a great guest because you're working. I mean, you got it. Your audio works. Your video works. High quality. I mean,
You'd be surprised how much research takes place on Google Hangouts and Skypes now. There's so many meetings online, so you become a pro pretty quickly.
Oh yeah. And I mean, so there you go. So Nate is out, and I think everybody else is in. So let's roll the show. So we have this Ferguson, Missouri thing going on here.
No indictment. Wow.
I don't know what that means. We don't do we do weather here. We'll leave that to the other pundits. I'm just thankful that I'm not the guy cutting off Dancing with the Stars tonight. All right, recorder number 1, recorder number 2 for both tracks. And here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. WeatherBrains! Hello, weather geeks of the world. I guess the Weather Channel has kind of claimed that name. We'll have to use weather weenies, dorks, dweebs, nerds, whatever. Welcome. This is WeatherBrains, the weekly show all about weather, episode number 461. It's the Thanksgiving episode for November 24th, 2014, the Monday before Thanksgiving. Typically a very active time for weather, very interesting time for weather, and we got a cool show here. Almost everybody's here, considering the fact that it is a holiday week. We have one that is out, and that would be Nate Johnson of WRAL. However, he sent a news segment, so via the magic of Dropbox and Audio Hijack Pro and everything else, we're going to play Nate's news here in just a little bit. But I typically start with Brian Peters. Brian is the internationally beloved meteorologist. Brian, are you still internationally beloved?
I don't have the foggiest idea, but I'm grumpy as all get out tonight.
Oh, good.
Uh-oh.
Good. Go. Let's hear it. Rant. Go.
Well, it could be trouble for you and me if I rant because I'm upset with the jabronis about our station.
Oh no!
Go! I can't wait to hear this. And keep in mind, this is being simulcast on our digital weather channel, which makes it even better. So just go.
Well, I didn't put 2 and 2 together until today, but it turns out that when the station was sold from All Britain to Sinclair Broadcasting, it was changed on my supplier. And it turns out that all the programming that I had scheduled to be recorded, none of them have recorded.
Yeah.
Well, like 6 weeks, all these favorite programs. My wife keeps saying, how come we're not getting this show? How come we're not getting this show? Today I finally figured it out. So
well, let's just start pointing fingers here. I mean, so this is AT&T Uverse, right?
Yeah, AT&T Uverse, and what's funny, James, is that the station changed, but the location on Uverse didn't change. So I had no.
You can't record anything.
But I can't record anything unless I go back and set a new recording.
I will say this: I do think we have the most convoluted situation in broadcast history here.
I agree with you completely.
What's stunning is that we do not have a .1 presence in this market. Our primary signal for this market is on 68.2. And our name is ABC 3340. Now you go figure all this out. I mean, this whole, and of course, understand 68 is really not on 68. That's a virtual channel. The actual RF channel is something else, like 35. So goodness, when I go do kid cams in schools, I'm trying to tell these kids what number to watch. It takes like a 30-minute dissertation before they can understand it. So
I can't figure out though why if the recording was on the right thing and it kept the same slot. Then why is it that my recordings had to all be reset again? I don't know. I didn't understand that part. But anyway,
that makes no sense.
We could do a whole 30 minutes on this situation. But the most bizarre thing, we kept saying over the air, for those of you that receive us over the air, you have to rescan. We're going off these channels and going on these channels. And we said no satellite provider will be affected. Well, DirecTV moved us from 33 to 67. just out of nowhere. So it's been
Well,
been a
and you
rough-
first you
rough
first
ride.
took our station off, and for several hours I couldn't get anything, and then it came back in the same spot. So who's to know that your programming is got to all be redone? So I'm cranky anyway.
But listen, the one thing about WeatherBrains, you know where to find us here. I mean, you know we don't change. We are here. And by the way, at some point we got to rant on this governor of New York.
Oh yeah.
I think that
John Scala, he's your problem because you're the closest one to him.
Of course.
John is going to give him his one-uppance tonight.
So this jabroni, second-rate politician guy, accuses the National Weather Service in Buffalo of not doing their job and not preparing the citizens and not letting the people know that a lake effect snowstorm was coming. And John, correct me if I'm wrong. These guys did a heroic job of telling people. Well, so what's up with this knucklehead?
Oh, I don't know where to begin with this. He was in Cheektowaga when he issued these statements. Of all places, this area, they had more than 7 feet of snow. And he's complaining. In fact, his statement was, we just need more weather stations, and then they can forecast.
And more weather radios. And some sirens. Get some sirens while you're at it.
Oh, please. I mean, this guy, and look, this is no right-wing, the Lord is my witness. I don't know if this guy is a Democrat, a Republican, right-wing, left-wing. I don't care. He's a bonehead. So here's the next thing, John. I read somewhere today where this guy said he's going to form his own weather service.
Yeah. What? That's exactly what he wants to do for the state of New York. In fact, we're getting ahead of ourselves. That's my pick of the week.
So Jeff Tung's going to be available. We need to get hold of him while he's a free agent.
Yeah, he's saying, the Weather Service won't supply enough weather stations. We're going to put together our own weather service for the state of New York.
That's a good idea.
So John, is it true that you are going to be the head of this new New York State Weather Service?
Absolutely. I wouldn't touch that with a 90-foot pole.
You going to launch some satellites there, John?
New York Mesonet?
Yeah.
What'd you say, Aubrey?
I said New York Mesonet?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Did you see
we'll try and save some time at the end of the show to get into this. If we're going to have some picks of the week involving this guy.
Oh, yeah.
I love what Dennis wrote on the Gawker weather vane. I mean, that was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But the question is, and understand, we have some current Weather Service employees here. Rick Smith, do you think? And I know you can only say so much, but I think he owes the Weather Service in Buffalo an apology. All these men and women.
Personally, off the clock this evening, sitting in my palatial estate here in Northwest Norman, not at work, I agree. I mean, he's, there's only so much we can do. I mean, he obviously screwed up, and I think he's getting bad advice, and I'm seeing lots of comments out there on social media that, he was trying to use this. Aubrey mentioned the New York Mesonet. They are trying to fund a Mesonet like Oklahoma has and other states have for the state of New York. And some think he was getting all this stuff mixed up, and he thought this would be a good spot to, it was so bad, but it'll be better when we have this Mesonet in place. He just didn't know how to say, I don't know. I'm not defending him. I'm just saying, I agree with you. That is just misrepresenting what went on as far as we know, and when certainly the forecasts were there. And I mean, it's funny, the people on my social media down here are saying, we were in Oklahoma and we knew it was going to start. How could you not?
We talked about it on this show last Monday night, which leads me to think that we need a jabroni face-off every week, because now we could put the governor of Georgia against the governor of New York in the first round.
There you go. You have a tournament of champions of jabroni.
Yeah, exactly. We got two winners right out of the gate.
There'll be a large field to choose from.
For first-time listeners that don't know, Rick is the warning coordination meteorologist for the National Weather Service in Norman, Oklahoma, and again, he's speaking for himself, not on behalf of his agency. Everything we're saying here, this is just, Brian and I, we are speaking for ourselves here. This might be the last night we have a job here, Brian, but this guy, and what is it about politicians where they don't admit that they're wrong? to me, the first leadership characteristic, if you and look, everybody can make a mistake. I can make a mistake like that. And obviously, this guy didn't know anything about science or meteorology. I mean, this is the same bonehead that said tornadoes just don't happen here. Well, any third grader can get a climatological book and go back and look at a history of the tornadoes in New York State. The guy obviously doesn't know what he's talking about. And I can talk about things I don't understand, and I can be horribly wrong, but it seems like the politicians will never, I guarantee you, and I hope I'm wrong, but if this guy admits he's wrong, and if he apologizes to the Weather Service in Norman or in Buffalo, I'll drink this.
Norman. He needs to apologize to the Weather Service in Norman too.
Yeah, and I'm holding up some hand sanitizer, which will probably kill me if I do that. But
oh gosh,
to me, one of the first leadership characteristics is when you're wrong, admit it. Admit you made a mistake. I am so sorry. I want you to know that I made a mistake. What I said was wrong. I apologize to the Weather Service employees in Buffalo. They did a heroic job. They did a job that saved human life and protected property, and I will ensure that this kind of mistake won't happen again. That's what he needs to be saying. But I guarantee you that this guy's going back to his Roach Motel or wherever the guy stays. He'll never say another word about it. It's like these guys are they can do no wrong. They can say nothing wrong, and it's just bewildering. But if we get into this, we're going to talk about this all night to start with. Kevin Shelley is joining us from his new palatial estate in Wichita Falls, Texas. Kevin.
And he rolls in from the side.
He rolls in.
Hey!
Hey!
I've missed you guys.
Where are you, man? Where are you?
I've missed you guys. How are you?
Good. So you are at your new home in Wichita Falls, Texas.
I am. I'm taking over for a guy who has been here for 32 years. Skip McBride, amazing guy. Just couldn't have been more gracious and helpful. But his last show was 6 o'clock on Thursday, and up until that point, I've been here, three and a half weeks. I had him here backing me up, but now I'm by myself, and so I'm in a panic because we have a bunch of shows that we do. We do a 5 and a 6, but then a 9 o'clock show on the Fox affiliate.
Wow.
And we do a 10 o'clock show. So yeah, as long as I've had somebody here helping me on the weather system, and because it's these weather systems now, we're on Weather Central, but and that's what we had at TXCN. But they're all so customizable that you can't just walk into somebody's shop and go, oh yeah, well I use Weather Central, and just sit right down, because everybody kind of gets in their own little niche. But I'm telling you, this couldn't be a nicer town. People have been so genuinely warm and welcoming. I just can't believe the outreach that we have had from people, and the nice comments and stuff on Facebook and whatnot. So we just couldn't be more pleased to be here. And I'll mention on the show, since I mentioned it a few minutes ago in the pre-show, but back in this spring when I was commuting for that other group, my commute was about an hour and 15 minutes each way. And now it's 6.5. And so I'm pretty pleased by that.
Yeah.
It's a big gas savings. And I have one request, Rick. We were in Dallas, Fort Worth, and so now I'm actually within 4 Weather Service offices. Could not be more pleased to be in between the OUN Weather Service office, just a fabulous office, and FWD, Fort Worth. In fact, Mark Fox was up here. Mark Fox used to work at this television station, so he came up for the big retirement. But Rick, if you would do me a favor, the thing I miss most is that we're not an upper air site here. So if you could get that rolling for us tomorrow, that would just be awesome.
Oh, sure. I'd like an upper air site.
I'll put it on the list.
Okay, John wants one too. Does anybody else want an upper air site while he's getting them?
At Buffalo.
Okay, Buffalo.
Contact the governor of New York. And, he has a whole weather service.
I heard you guys talking about that guy. The only comment I would make to that is I can't. I mean, don't these politicians have people that look out for them? And
that's exactly what I was thinking.
This guy did the exact. Were they not watching what happened in Atlanta? And somebody stand up and said, "Excuse me, Governor, that's not a good idea." I mean, he needs a new staff.
He uses the same guy that Governor Christie does in New Jersey. It's no
problem. Okay, that must be it.
Same guy. They're right there together. It's no problem.
Got it. Well, listen, I'm going to listen in, and I really missed you guys, and I'm going to try and get back into a groove and come back more regularly. But I'll be listening for a little bit. But did I mention that I'm in a panic because I don't have any graphics for my 9 o'clock show? So
Yeah, we're going to be intently spying on you. Leave that camera hot.
I'll leave the camera on. Yeah, we'll see.
This is
Watch
great.
it live.
You can watch me tripping over the cameras and the wires. I don't know where.
We've all
Evan,
done
I
that.
think you should, if you haven't already done it, I think you should take full credit for that 4+ inches of rain that you brought to.
Oh yeah, well, no, we've had 2. Yeah, we're in a 4-year drought here, and Rick can tell you more. A 4-year drought, exceptional drought on the U.S. Drought Monitor scale. And since I've been here, we've had 2 multi-inch rainstorms.
Wow.
And snow last weekend. And for my next trick in about 8 or 9 months, I'm going to make it hot. So.
There you go.
Rain Man.
So somebody on Twitter just said a grand jury should indict Governor Cuomo for being a whiner. That's good.
Oh, gotta love it.
Oh man, Aubrey Urbanowitz, the lovely, talented Aubrey, is in Edit Bay number 2. What's up?
Oh, nothing. We just, I got back in town earlier today, about 30 minutes before my shift started. We had our Thanksgiving this weekend. So I went down to Johnson City, Tennessee.
So what do you do on Thanksgiving Day?
We, well, my husband and I have to work opposite shifts.
Well, that explains the early Thanksgiving. So, what we're going to talk about this pre-Thanksgiving storm. How will you be impacted Wednesday?
Yeah, that was something pleasant to come home to. In my head, I'm thinking, oh crap. You know, I mean, it's
show
it's
title.
Not, you know, it's not that I mind it. It's the what the storms have become. You know, the Weather Channel saying 8 to 12 inches. Oh my God, are we really going to get 24.5 inches of snow in 3 hours? And this person's saying this, and it's a hassle and it's a headache. And to be honest, I'm despising winter now because of it, because it just has become so much more of a hassle and a headache. And I love my job, and I'll do my job. I'll be here, whatever we need to do to cover the storm, to be here and stuff. But good grief.
No, I agree. I know.
Worked up over who cares? It's couple inches or rain, and second of all, this storm isn't even concrete yet. I mean, John, are you tracking the RPM?
You know this is going to be a good show, and Aubrey is cranky. I mean, it's going to be a great show.
And my husband's going, I've got the bottle of wine chilled for when you get home.
she might pop it out during the show here.
If I wasn't at work.
No, I know. I'm the same way. A winter storm, it doesn't matter now what you say.
It just sucks the life out of you.
Yeah, I mean, it does. It drains you. I mean, all you're doing is trying to put out fires, and after a while, you just give up. Because I heard on the Weather Channel, and I heard on Facebook, and I heard on this channel, and I heard this guy's. Then
if you think they're right, then believe them and come to me crying when they're wrong.
Boy, she's good. Aubrey's on it tonight. This might be the greatest show ever. There's a little element of crankiness here in everybody, but Bill Murray is somewhere in Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, or something there. Where are you?
I'm in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, James, which is a lovely place.
You ever been to Moose Jaw?
No, but it's right down the street. I think I'll go there tomorrow before I fly home for Thanksgiving.
Maybe you could do next week's show down there. But
yeah,
bring in our guest before she hangs up on us.
Yeah, well, it seems that all the panelists on WeatherBrains have sort of been on strike here for a week or so, waiting for a raise. So management came in and said, "Look, we'll give you a promotion." And of course, we're all gullible enough to take it. So for the first time tonight, we get to call ourselves the WeatherBrains. And upper management has brought in a replacement panelist. She's a writer, PhD student at Virginia Tech in the Science and Technology Studies program. She's currently out at NCAR in Boulder, where she's studying how forecasters communicate certainty in short-fused, high-uncertainty events like flash floods and tornadoes. She is particularly interested in the challenges that forecasters face in using ground truth reports and by various groups in their decision-making processes, and in the history of the Citizen Observation Network, more generally. She was an alum from show 416 last year, so she volunteered to come and interview us. And Jen, I'm going to remind you that this was your idea. As I tell you, Jen Henderson, take us away.
No, it's my pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate the invitation and allowing me to ask you some questions. I think, this is what I love to do. So if you don't know exactly what I do in terms of my research, I like to sit with the weather forecasters and watch and understand what they do and talk to them about how they, issue forecasts, watch all the different technology, the different 15 different screens that people have up, how those are translating into the text products. So, and then asking people questions. So I'm interested in stories, and I'm interested in particular in your stories tonight. I wanted to just preface this a little bit to say I'm acting as a facilitator in this role, and a lot of these questions, I scoured Facebook, the Was-Is page, I went to AMS chapters, I emailed colleagues and said, what do you all want to hear from these folks tonight? And I got a bunch of great questions.
All right, I got to run. I'll be back.
I was up.
From different groups. So while some of these questions are my own, the vast majority of what I'm going to be talking to you all about and asking you about comes from your viewers and people who love and respect and are interested in what you all do. So
that was sneaky.
Well, and I will also say that, I'm not trying to be sneaky or tricky, so if there's a question I ask and you'd like to reframe it or tweak it slightly, or there's an interesting way of saying it that I haven't thought of, please feel free to do that. So, we all good? We clear? We ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
Guys
Ground rules laid. All right, we love
it. Okay, and I understand I've got about 50 minutes or so, so if you all could give me like a 5-minute warning just so that I know to wrap up if there's any other questions or last comments.
Well, that was before James took 30 minutes to do the intros to the panelists. But anyway, that's James'
time. We've got all night. We'll be here till
regardless
midnight.
of how much time we have, you just let me know when I, need to wrap up here. So I anticipate I'm not going to get through all these questions because we're going to have such a great time. But I'm really interested in this first bit of this conversation that you all have been having. It strikes me that a lot of it can be framed by just communication issues. And as you all know, that when you go to NWA or you go to AMS and service assessments, one of the #1 issues that gets constantly raised is communication. How to better communicate forecasts, how to better communicate uncertainty, how to communicate between different groups. You guys have talked about a lot of the different challenges that have been kind of raised just in the context of New York. I'm curious, a topic that always comes up, and people, particularly in the Weather Service, are interested in this right now, the integrated warning teams, or integrated weather teams as they're called. For the viewers who don't know what this is, the gathering together of different members of the weather community to try and facilitate communication, also understand each other's processes and develop relationships. And I'm curious if integrated warning teams or integrated weather teams might be something that would be useful in addressing some of these issues, particularly like something if you invited Governor Cuomo to an integrated weather team, for example, and he understood better the National Weather Service processes. Would this be a step toward addressing some of these issues? And I know there are challenges with that, but how do you guys see the integrated weather team, or are there other maybe solutions or ways forward that we're not addressing in terms of building better communication networks?
Rick Smith, you're up.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't hear her say my name, Bill, but okay.
And that's what's thrown out to all of you. I know Rick and I have had this conversation a few times, but...
Yeah. Well, I think the concept of an integrated warning team, the idea behind that, the communication, getting together and, acknowledging what each other does and the limitations each other has is really probably at the core of this. I don't have any idea what went on in the Buffalo office or what was briefed to the governor's office or the state emergency management. I have no clue. We see the forecast discussions and see that there was apparently good forecast information there, but we really don't know for sure what went on. I'm assuming that there was good communication, but I think this is prime territory for this is what was done in Atlanta after that event that we've talked about so much, and we do this frequently after an event, is hot washes or after action reviews, where you go in and get all the parties together in a room and talk about how things went. And I think if not the governor himself, then someone in his office, the state emergency management, in our case, that's who's briefing the governor's office directly. I think there's definitely opportunities there to get people together, because I do think it's probably communication. If I can imagine what probably happened, I imagine that the State Emergency Management Office was having conference calls and doing briefings with whatever Weather Service office they were talking to, and they were getting good information. There's a disconnect somewhere in here that either the governor wasn't getting that information in real time, or he wasn't briefed, or he didn't know where it was coming from. So I think you're exactly right. I think communication is probably at the core of this particular issue, and really it's the core of a lot of the issues that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jen, maybe some of this is also expectation. I started putting some notes on my Facebook page about this potential event over last weekend. In fact, I was just looking back. I think Sunday was the first day that I put something on there. And at that point, the Weather Service had already issued a lake effect snow warning, and they were already talking about feet of snow. Now, if the governor's getting upset that, hey, you said 1 to 3 feet, we got 7, give me a break. And the gradient that was in place produced 6 inches of snow at the airport in Buffalo. 5 miles to the south in Cheektowaga, they had 60 inches. How is that going to be forecast? That's an impossible scheme. So the fact that the Weather Service was out in front and already talking about warnings and saying there were going to be feet of snow, I think then it becomes an issue on the part of the public. Okay, we have been forewarned. This is, and I do remember seeing the word historic in one of those statements. So I apologize, all my clocks are going off.
It's 9 o'clock.
You're going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
It's 10 o'clock. It's 10 o'clock. So I think, Jen, to follow up with what Rick was saying, it's definitely communication, but it's also expectation, and it's how we receive the information and act upon it.
Mm-hmm. But it strikes me.
Let me just say this. I mean, as I get older, I think communicating, coordinating, being on the same page is very important. When I was young, I used to think I had to be a cowboy, and I'm going to get this right, and the Weather Service is wrong, and all that's way behind me now. And I think we need to know each other. A lot of people in the integrated warning team really don't know each other. A lot of emergency managers don't know us. We don't know them. Sometimes broadcast meteorologists don't know the Weather Service people. So I think those gatherings are very important, if nothing else, just to bond a little bit and to spend some time together and get to know one another. That's very helpful, because when you get in the heat of the battle, it sure is better knowing the people you're working with,
Yeah. But it strikes me, I'm wondering if you think that's enough, or if I hear this conversation about communication a lot, and integrated warning teams are one way of addressing it. But is it enough, or are there other things? Like, where are we missing the boat in terms of communication?
I think the listening is an aspect of it.
Okay.
I think the listening and, understanding sometimes what is being said. I think that's another part of the communication. On the other side, that has to be thought of. We can't account for how people interpret this information if we're giving it out, in a simple form, as easy as, I remember reading NWS Buffalo and talking about they're trying to figure out if it's comparing to this major storm, and it probably will beat that storm, and they're talking about major storms that this thing is comparable to and will likely beat a couple days out ahead of this storm. And if that kind of information is getting communicated, are people really listening and grasping the concept? And or they just being like some sports broadcasters who just say, oh, the weatherman's wrong 50% of the time and he still keeps his job. That listening aspect and grasping what we're saying, I think, is the other side of the coin.
And Jen, one other thing to follow up what Aubrey said and what John said. You asked, is it enough? And I don't think anybody thinks this, in the Weather Service especially, but having an integrated warning team meeting where you bring everybody together once or twice a year, that's not going to cut it. I mean, this is a constant thing. This is a daily or a weekly thing. Like James alluded to, you have to build those relationships before the 6 feet of snow arrives, and you have to have that trust in those relationships, and that takes constant interaction, not just twice a year meeting, but all the time. Every opportunity you get to go to a conference, a workshop, a hot wash, an after action, conference calls, weekly webinars, whatever. It's a constant, every day, almost work that has to go on at the Weather Service side and really everywhere. I mean, it's up to everybody to have that relationship, but I know, just looking at it from my perspective, that's always at the front of my list. Is, you know, we have to. I know I'm wanting to be sure my communication is good with our governor's office now after this week, even more than ever. So you always have to. We're always working at that, and it's a constant, every day of the year kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I would just follow up on what Aubrey was saying too. It's a great question about listening. How do you all? Is there a way that you guys have developed in terms of practices of disseminating information, of following up with people who are getting that information to know whether or not they are listening, or how they're understanding what you're doing? What's that process for you? Like, for example, Rick or John or Aubrey, any of you, how do you measure that? How do you know when people are listening and if they're getting the right message?
That's a great question, and I think from past experience, I'm very cognizant of at the initial stage of an event, and I'm cornered like I was this past weekend. I was in a department store and I was cornered. This was Saturday. The event's not going to begin until Wednesday, and I was cornered. And what came to mind was, they're only going to hear what I say the first time, and any changes I may make to that afterwards may not be heard, or at least not interpreted properly. So I'm very cognizant of what my initial thinking is right out of the box.
I know one of the things that's helped us in listening and monitoring and trying to get a feel of the pulse of, are people getting it, or what do they think we're telling them, is social media. I mean, obviously monitoring, especially Twitter, just monitoring what the conversations are. And we actually even monitor at least one of the TV stations here, probably two of them, have live blogs that they'll do during a significant event. And there's real people in there, and they're giving their real life opinions and asking their real life questions, and you have to have a special constitution, I think, to be able to read some of that, because it'll drive you nuts if you're not patient. But it does give you a feel for what people. I mean, it's very eye-opening to read some of that and see, oh my gosh, is that what you think we're saying? And then it's like, oh, okay, how can we fix it? How do we change? How do we start moving the ship in a different direction? But social media has been huge for us with that, monitoring the pulse of what's going on out in the real world.
Yeah.
I'll second what Rick said. You know, I follow most people that follow me on Twitter, and due to there's some limitations, and you can't follow everybody. But if I think they're a real person, I will try and follow them, and I will look at that news feed off Twitter, that stream, and within a minute or two, I can really get a feel if people are listening to the information that we're trying to disseminate, whether it be a winter storm, a tornado outbreak, whatever, or if they don't get it, if they're confused. I agree with Rick. I will know within minutes if the general public, if Joe Q public has a firm knowledge of what's about to happen. It's very, very helpful to me, and that's one of the reasons I follow so many people. You know, I've said this on the show before. It doesn't make sense. I see some television weather people. They'll have 5,000 followers, which is a huge number. That's great. And I look to see who they follow back, and they follow back one or two, and it's like their mama or their wife or their spouse or something. So that's a very important part of the social media element, is listening back to see if they're understanding what we're saying.
Yeah, it's an important part of the communication process in general. I mean, I think that's a great metaphor for how I think a lot of people think about communication, is dissemination of information one way, and not necessarily listening and being able to adjust the message on the fly. That's what I hear you all saying, is that if you're in tune with your audience and you're hearing kind of that immediate feedback, then you can get a sense for how to adjust your message so that they can better understand what it is you're trying to say. Is that something that you do, Aubrey, as well? Is that what, are we on kind of on track with what you were trying to talk about?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. And listening to what they're saying, or even if I'm posting something and maybe they're asking a question that's already answered in the post that I asked, and I'm thinking, all right, well, how could I have, phrased this differently or worded this differently to where, I said this and maybe I didn't word it correctly, with communication, and that's something that, I look at as far as making sure that I'm getting the point across.
I read some comments today, Jen, about this upcoming storm where a viewer was interpreting the lack of a snowfall forecast as being you don't know what's going to happen. So they're equating uncertainty with lack of knowledge. And to me, that's a real roadblock.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just at a climate engineering for climate extremes workshop here at NCAR, and I don't know much about climate, so I'll acknowledge that up front. But uncertainty was a huge part of the communication problem, giving people one number versus a range. And I hadn't heard uncertainty talked about as a range. I had thought it was more like a lack of knowledge about something, because I'm not from a scientific background, so I don't think about uncertainty in mathematical terms as a range. So I do think I hear uncertainty communicated in different ways, and I think it's a different definitional kind of challenge for forecasters as well. Brian, were you going to say something? It looked like maybe you were about ready to jump in here. No? Okay.
Well, no. I was aware of the lake effect snow warning, and I was just curious as to what the wording was. And I was looking at the lake effect snow warnings out of the Buffalo Weather Service office, and you can only go back 50 versions, but it goes back to Wednesday morning. And I guess they did miss it in some regards, because they got between 70 and 90 inches, according to one newspaper article I saw. And they forecast 1 to 2 feet. And so, I guess they kind of missed it. But by the same token, I mean, that's got to be a huge, huge record kind of thing, I would expect. And, so, no, that's I was just curious.
Yeah, depends on what you mean by missed.
Yeah. Well, and also I read the, I don't want to take John's picks of the week here, but I was reading the articles. I was reading the articles that John has in his picks of the week about what the governor said, and it's pretty obvious the governor didn't get any kind of forecast that had snow in it at all. I mean, so obviously he didn't read what I was reading.
Maybe he was in the wrong state.
No way to explain it.
Well, on this note of social media, and I'm sure you guys have talked about this before in various settings, but you all do a fabulous job. Many of you do a fabulous job keeping up with so many different social media sites. I mean, between blogging and tweeting and Facebooking, if you do that, but also Google Plus and Google and Instagram, all these different social media sites. And I know that it can be a very rigorous sort of job, both getting information out there, but also monitoring what's happening. And the common question that a lot of people wanted to know is, how does that meet with kind of your goals of what you're trying to do on social media, and how do you have time to do it? Like, how do you schedule your day, or how do you think about balancing that with your other, like the forecasting part of what you do? So I'll just throw that out to those of you who do the social media.
Well, I'll start, because this is one of my greatest struggles. I've said this many times, the greatest equalizer in life, it's time. Everybody on this show down here, everybody in those boxes, we all have 24 hours in a day. Everybody listening to this show, we all have 24 hours in a day, and how you spend that time really determines who you are. And obviously, at least for me, the way I look at it, I have to prioritize my life, and tweeting is not at the top. Believe it or not, the tweeter is not number one. It's not even close to being number one. But when it comes to my career, toss out, spiritual, family, all these things. I'm just talking about my career. My primary job, I'm in the service industry. And if you don't think you're in the service industry, and if you're doing this, then you need to go do something else. This is not about being some blow-dried boob on television to be some big star. This is about serving the public. It's about having a servant's heart, which means today, since this never turns off, it used to be when the news was over, you're done for a while. It never turns off. You have to be there, and you have to be willing not to sleep a lot and to take time that you might spend on things you enjoy, answering questions on social media. But there comes a limit, Jen, where you have to stop. Maybe you're spending some time with your spouse, in my case, my wife, or maybe your son's got a ball game, and by golly, if my son's playing in a state championship baseball game, you're not going to see me tweeting except at the end of the game that we won. And I think people understand that. And the other thing people ask, why don't you just hire some guy to run your account while you're out with your wife or at your son's ball game? I think that's a scam. If they get a tweet from Span, it needs to be from Span. It doesn't need to be from some high school kid I'm paying $5 an hour to do that. So, but it's a matter of making a priority list of your time, but having a servant's heart, meaning you got to be out there a lot. You got to be able to multitask. My middle name is multitask.
No, I agree with James. And when I do social media, if I'm off or at home, I think, okay, what's important? It's a really nice day outside. We posted about this yesterday. It's a really nice day outside. Do I need to post right now, or can it wait until I go to work? I try to prioritize what's important. So I have my time that I need to work on, because not only do we have work, but a lot of times we have other obligations through our job that we have to do, whether it be classroom visits or appearances or whatever, meetings or whatever may have you, and then also family time. I went away for the weekend, and I didn't check my email, I didn't check my phone, I didn't check my Facebook, unplugged, for the entire weekend. That was my family weekend. Now if there's a huge event and I'm in town and I happen to be off, that's a different story. But at first I started to, you're just doing the social media all the time, and I'm trying to keep up with other forecasters, which you cannot keep up with Brad Panovich. No matter what you do, you cannot keep up with Brad Panovich. But I realize now that I have to unplug, and I have to take my time, my family, my husband's time, my dog. It's just, I need that separate. I love my career. I'm very driven in my career, but I need that separation to myself.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's very similar. It's a little bit different though, because first of all, I have the same challenges. I mean, there's only 24 hours in a day. It's also a challenge because weather never stops. James mentioned that. There's always weather. So even if I'm going to Target or whatever I was doing last Sunday as the snow was starting, I'm tweeting about freezing drizzle that's starting, and my wife's in the car with me, and she's a very patient woman, God bless her, but you do have to back away from that. And I can tell you, I don't know when it was, what day it was, but it was during a winter weather event a couple of years ago. This was before the weather service office that I work at was really fully into social media. We had just started, and essentially it was a one-man operation. I was doing everything. And it was one of these deals where it was the thing Aubrey was talking about earlier. People were just, being silly about stuff, and I just hit a wall, and it's like, I can't do this anymore. Since then, we're fortunate, and we kind of do have a staff that's doing it. I have my own personal Twitter. I like to try to keep people up that are following that, but we have the office Twitter too. So it's not like you're never really completely without that connection to the weather service, but it's interesting that some people would prefer to have a connection with a person with a personal Twitter account versus an institutional Twitter account. But it's you do have to turn it off every once in a while. It's hard to do with weather, and it's hard to do when you have and not nearly as much as James and the other panelists here, but you have a sense that people are expecting you to tweet something. You have a sense that, okay, gosh, why is the wind blowing so hard? How come? What's going on? How come? And you think if you don't tweet about it, then you're missing out, or they're gonna go to someone else and not. You know what I mean? It's you feel an obligation to be a servant, to be a public servant, and to provide that information. But it's hard to you have to do it, but it's hard to you got to turn it off.
I was just thinking the same word. You do feel that obligation to report.
Yeah.
That sounds exhausting.
It can be.
It can be. I think what strikes me about this discipline that we're in is two things. One, that it is a 24/7 ordeal because the weather's always there. And anybody that's interested in weather is always watching. I just always am, regardless of where I am. I want to know what the weather is.
Yes.
The second aspect is I think we're emotionally involved in what we do because, as James was saying, because of the service aspect of it, there's always somebody at the other end of the line that's going to depend upon what you're saying. And that could be somebody you meet in a grocery store, or as last Saturday morning was somebody at the landfill who recognized me and wanted to talk about the weather.
What?
I'm serious. I couldn't believe it. But it happens.
You were hanging out at a landfill?
Well,
they don't have garbage
pickup
pickup in Pennsylvania, James. You don't know that. You don't know that. It's a little secret about the Northeast. They don't have garbage pickup.
Boy, some people would really capitalize on that. A meteorologist in a landfill. You're lucky you got out of there as easy as you did. So.
Yeah. So, John, just on that point, I think you all, as I'm listening to what you guys are saying, I mean, when I say it sounds exhausting, I guess what I'm trying to get at is the human aspect of being a forecaster. And, one of the things that I'm really interested in working with forecasters is that a lot of attention is paid in research on trying to understand the public, trying to unpack the public, understand how they think about weather, best practices for communication, issues of evacuation, sheltering, all of that. There's not as much research that looks back at the forecaster to try and understand the challenges that forecasters face and what a day in the life of a forecaster is like, or how the technology, how the political issues arise in one's job. And I'm just curious if you speak to the public and talk to them and had their ear and they were very interested in what you had to say. What is it about you and your jobs that you wish that they knew that they may not know?
That's a great question.
Feel free to reframe it. That wasn't quite framed right, but.
I gave a talk about a year ago to all the 8th graders at one of the middle schools. And when I was done, one of the students came up to me and said, "Hey, my dad wanted me to ask you a question." And I said, "Sure, go. What is it?" "Well, how do you keep your job when you're wrong so much of the time?" And that's an unfortunate commentary on the life of a forecaster to some extent. You're only as good as your last bad forecast.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a burden that everybody who wants to be an operational forecaster carries with them.
I think I wish the public knew, I know for me when I come in, I check the temperature. I check to see, if I'm right or wrong compared to what I forecast. I look at last night's temperature and I just get that little smile on my face. If, when we're within a couple degrees, 2 degrees, that's fine. When I know that that was a good forecast and that everything panned out. And it happens often, more often than what the public realizes many times. And, we take great pride in saying, yeah, that was good. That was good. That was a good, decision we made. Yeah, I think that was good that we went that. And, it's pride. It's
It is pride.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Aubrey kind of stole my thunder just a little bit there. I think one of the, no pun intended, one of the things, it is. I wish people, and I think some do, but I wish people understood how much pride is involved and how dedicated that the forecasters are in our office, and every weather service office, every TV station. We would be doing this stuff for free if we weren't getting paid for it. People are passionate about this. People are upset when their forecast doesn't verify. This is not a job where we're on a production line and turn out whatever we're going to turn out and then go home and come back the next day and do it again. I mean, we have to live with whatever it is that we just forecast, and whether it's a tornado warning or an ice storm warning or a 7-day forecast with boring weather in it. I mean, we work with such passionate talented people who live in this area, who have family in this area. When we're doing the forecast, I'm doing the forecast for my wife and kids and my friends and the people they go to school with and the people in the community. This is not just a job. I mean, it is a lifestyle. It is our lives. And I think those people that say, well, it must be nice to get paid for only being right half the time, they will never get it. They'll never understand what it means to do this.
And chiming in on what Rick is saying, I've often said to groups of people that I don't know a single meteorologist who came to work and said, I think I'm going to put out the worst possible forecast I can.
Right.
It's not in our. We don't do that. I mean, the environment may not respond in the way we've worded it in our forecast, but we certainly didn't intend for it to happen that way. Mm-hmm. We are wrong some of the time, but I think a lot of people also condemn all meteorologists and say that we're all wrong, when the truth is a lot of times you may have a better forecast than some other forecasts. We do compare our forecasts sometimes. And I know some. I mean, I remember one forecast at the Olympics that I was the Summer Olympics in '96. I was very proud of. An early August day, and to forecast a high of 82. The actual forecast, or that's the forecast high I put out for that day, and in the middle, early August in Atlanta, Georgia. Okay, and the actual high that day was 78. Mm. And, I missed it by 4 degrees, but yet I was very proud of the fact that I think guidance was 90.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, you're probably on the right side of the error there.
So, I mean, I missed it by 4, but when you look at what guidance was, they missed it by 12. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the forecast was really a lot better because of something I did, and because it was one of those situations with what we call the wedge or cold air damming, and, picked it up, and the models just didn't do it. Mm-hmm. So you feel good about that, but of course you still miss it a little bit. But I think the one thing I'd like people to know is that we don't miss it as often as people perceive that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Rick, what you said made a really commented to me. Struck a comment with me as well. When I was at the Weather Channel a number of years ago, I was covering a tornado warning in Atlanta. I think it was about 7 in the morning. It's one of those early morning events. You got a low-level jet screaming out of the south, and the cloud base is about 500 meters, and you're thinking, oh man, this is not good. And I remember covering that tornado warning live in Atlanta on the Weather Channel and telling my family where to go on the air. They were telling me exactly where you should be right now. And that is a very real situation I think all of us have experienced, where our own family is impacted by the weather event we're covering.
Mm-hmm. Aubrey, were you jumping in there? Did I hear you?
Well, I was just going to say, even the little things, when I go home, I look up and I go, yeah, it's clear, good, we went clear, even when there were clouds earlier, or I'll get up in the morning and I look out the window and I'm going, I should have gone just sunny instead of mostly sunny. Yeah. The little things that we think of that, maybe 98% of the public doesn't realize, and I see it and I go, oh, should have just gone sunny instead of mostly sunny, and those are that's what I think of, and it's it's that satisfaction, it's that knowing that you put out a good forecast, and just having a lot of pride for your job and respect for what you do. There are not a lot of other jobs that really end up promoting and flaunting your flaws and mistakes, and it's kind of sad that all of our mistakes are basically aired out there. What other jobs do you guys work at home, where, every single mistake is put out in front of thousands of people?
Yeah. No, and I think that in terms of working with forecasters, as somebody who's a social scientist, this is something I'm interested in, is how the different publics and expert groups can kind of come together and see each other differently, see the complexities on either side of the equation. That the public is far more complex than sometimes they're talked about, and so are the forecasters. But there's not just one kind of forecaster or one way of being a forecaster. And I guess So that's going to lead to a question that may seem a little, I don't know if it's awkward because I'm a social scientist, but I don't want you to acknowledge that for just a moment. I want you to just think of me as a regular interviewer. One of the concerns I have in the weather community, I started about 3 years ago working with forecasters, and this was when social science was kind of ramping up as something that was really sought out and being integrated into, grants and research and different kinds of topics. And I'm wondering, how do you all see social science? Like, what do you hope ultimately social science helps get the weather community? Like, how do you see the partnership playing out? And what do you think social science can bring to you all in terms of these problems or issues, or just in general, how you think about social science and that partnership?
Well, let me start with that. In my state, Jen, we had a Sentinel event 3.5 years ago. This was April 27th, 2011, and one day in my state, 252 people were killed by tornadoes. I thought the science side of the warning process could not be better. There was an excellent warning, and in one day in my state, we had 62 tornadoes. One day, 62. There was an excellent warning for every single one of them. And in my opinion, I've been here 35 years. I understand the people and the culture and the geography better than most anybody else here. And I thought the death toll should have been 30. I was bewildered. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. And we're all trained in physical science, and we're not trained in human behavior. We're not trained in communication. And I think that's when it hit me. Goodness gracious, we got a long way to go here. So that's when we reached out to social science to give us some answers. Why in the world did that many people die on a day when the warnings were so good? And what can we do to improve the way we communicate to be better the next time it happens? Not just a day that's historic like that, but just a day where there's 5 or 6 tornadoes. So that's been the greatest use for me. And then, of course, we had the snow event in my market earlier this year where we had some problems. So it has been very, very helpful, the social scientists. So on behalf of all of us, thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with James. I mean, obviously there's some tangible things. I'm kind of growing out of this weather service militaristic attitude of social scientists, please tell us what we can tell people to do so this won't happen. Instead of it's more of that other side of communication, the listening, understanding why people do what they do, and then trying to work in what we can do to influence that behavior. I'm hoping and looking forward, and I think it's going to happen eventually. It's just taking a while. I'm looking forward to the day when social science is a fully integrated part of what we do, not just oh yeah, let's have a social scientist come in and do something, or let's let the social science, everybody lumped together term. Look forward to the day when, we need social scientists in National Weather Service offices, in headquarters, in regions, and the WCM is kind of the de facto social scientist. I've taken not a single cultural geography or psychology class or sociology other than just a entry-level class in college or something. So I'm excited about the possibilities and what we're going to be able to learn and do, but I'm looking forward to the time when it's really fully integrated and it's just a part of the normal life in the Weather Service, not a special project or not something where it's a big deal that a social scientist is involved. It should be an everyday thing.
Okay. I guess let me explain a little of why I asked this question too, and it's good to hear what you all are saying in terms of expectations. A lot of people when they hear social science are not quite clear what it is, and it involves multiple disciplines with different kinds of perspectives and methods. But one of the things that I'm worried about, and maybe I'm wrong given what you guys have just said, one of the things I'm personally concerned about is that the expectation is that social science will offer answers or fixes to issues when a lot of social science isn't necessarily about revealing solutions, it's about revealing complexity. Like there's much more complexity involved in a scenario with human behavior than you might have first understood. And so there's not necessarily one way of thinking about human behavior. There might be 5. And so it's not really an answer that helps plug into something that solves it. And I'm not saying that's what you all are saying, but that's been my perception, is that I've been concerned that social science would be seen as something that could fix or solve or address a problem maybe too simply, much more so than social science actually as a practice allows for. As I said, most social scientists I know are really keen on revealing the complexity and revealing the messiness of scenarios and messiness of human behavior and messiness of how people behave. And it's hard to imagine how that would be simplified. So that's kind of a concern I've had.
Yeah, and Jen, that's kind of what I was getting to when I said, at the beginning that, tell us what we can say to make these people do the right thing or make them do what we want to do. From interacting with social scientists, with you and others, it's apparent to me that what's probably going to happen is we're going to have more questions after interacting with social scientists or after we learn more about what you know than we had before. I mean, there's no way you're going to be able to come into Oklahoma City and explain to us exactly why the people got in their cars and drove away on May 31st and what we can do to make them not do it next time. I know that is such a complex issue, and I imagine there are people out there that are hoping, okay, we'll get the social scientists in here and they'll tell us how to fix this. And I thought that at the beginning, but I'm seeing more and more that's like we're just getting more. It's in a way it's more frustrating, or when we don't know what we don't know about some of this, and when we find out, oh my gosh, this is even more complicated than we ever thought, then it's I don't think it's what people are expecting. Some people are expecting.
Right. Does anybody else want to weigh in on that before I move on?
Jen, I think I would say that being cognizant of the role that social science can play in the forecasting process, what it has done for me is raised my awareness of the words that I use, how I convey information, even body language and tone to that language is so critically important, and I'm much more aware of that, I think. I'm not looking for specific answers from social science. More so, it's just raising my own level of personal awareness.
I think that's a good point, and I agree with you. And I have been doing that more so lately too, but no, that is a good point.
So I'm curious, in addition to things like communication, and we talked about integrated warning teams, and also social science, social media, all of these up and coming sorts of changes to the weather community. What aspects of the weather community do you see as poised for change in the future? Like, what do you see as happening that maybe is just on the horizon? Changes in practice, changes in the way things are done, changes in partnerships.
I think the biggest change for me, again, I'm about to go walk in a television studio in 20 minutes and do a 3-minute weather segment. When I know everybody that's going to watch that, they know what the weather's going to do. All day long, they've been looking at it on their phone or on their doodad or your tablet, whatever. And that's the biggest issue for me is what can I do in that 3 minutes to be relevant to people that would make them want to watch. And I think the Ron Burgundy newscast approach that we did in the 70s and 80s and 90s, that's not working anymore. And we have to be willing to change. And for a lot of people, it's very hard. But if we don't change, we're going to die. And this is more of a television kind of answer to your question, not maybe necessarily related to weather, but it sure does affect me. And I think about that a lot. Why in the world do you need a James Spann, Aubrey, or John, Kevin, when anybody can look on their phone and find really good information? And if they really search it out with a good app or go to some good sites, they can find that. So that, to me, that's one of the biggest changes. And I don't think anybody has an answer. We're going to milk this model until it's dead. We're going to fly this in the ground. And it's going to take a few years for it to wind down. But something better, I think, will come out of this in the future. I don't know what it is, but I know it's important, like we've talked about, for me to be answering questions morning, noon, night, middle of the night from social media or whatever. But we have to build a new model for the broadcast meteorology business, Jen, and that's the biggest change for me.
Do you see that happening? Do you see you said there's resistance, but do you see some of that happening, that people are...
Well, I'll give you a clue of what's new within the last 3 weeks for the first time in my life. And understand, I'm old as dirt. The only guy older on the show is Brian Peters, all right? I'll always have Brian. But
I've been doing... Just walked all over me, didn't he?
Yeah, I've been doing the weather since the late 70s, and for the first time since 1978, I am not standing in front of a green wall on the late news. I'm not over there, good evening, sunny skies tomorrow for your Tuesday. No, you're not going to do that. I basically am carrying on a conversation with somebody with me that's in my weather center in there. Traditionally, it's one of the news anchors, but it might be a sports person. If it's a big sporting event coming up, I might bring in somebody else, but it's just going to be different. And I think this conversational method is good. We use a lot of interactive stuff with social media. It is radically different. And if you watch the live stream or 10 o'clock news segment, you'll see the difference. We've been doing this at 4 o'clock on the earliest newscast we do on my shift for 3 years. It has been very successful, and quite frankly, that newscast is very strong. It is a very highly rated newscast, and I've seen the success in that. So that's the biggest change that's brand new, Jen, is that for the first time ever, James Spann is not on the green wall, and if this keeps on working, we'll do that on some of the other newscasts. Now, during tornadoes, yes, I have to be on that wall. I know, based on social media or social science studies, that people need to see eye contact from me. They read my body language. I've got to be on that green board. And I will be there for tornadoes and for serious weather, but on routine days, no, I'm slowly coming off.
Okay. Interesting.
So, James, I like to change things up in my forecast, but of course I still do a traditional 3-minute forecast. So what is the response that you said it's been successful? So what is the response you've gotten from people who watch?
It's mixed. The older people hate it. The older people can't stand it. The people. These are people typically over 68, 69, or 70. I don't like it. That guy's horning in on your time, and you've been doing it this way forever. Why? There's some resistance there, but the truth is, and as sad as it is, that those demographics, while they're important to me because they're people, but yet that's not part of the business model. The business model, it's females 25 to 54, and we need those people watching us in order for the station to make money and be successful. And from that demographic, it's worked out fine. The resistance is coming from older people that don't necessarily have a fancy phone or a tablet, or they get it on a computer. They literally wait until 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night Eastern time to find out what the weather's going to do the next day. And that's where the biggest resistance is coming from. And and a lot of those people do watch our 4 o'clock. I remind them, we're doing this at 4, and you like that. What's the deal? And it's just a matter of, anytime you make a change, there's going to be some resistance to that. And I'm not saying what I'm doing is right. It might not be the ultimate right solution, but my point is I think we have to try and search for what the right answer is. And it's going to be different in every market. What works for me might not work for Aubrey or for John or for Kevin. But I just think we need to start tinkering around with different things. And I think the news people have to do the same thing. This deal at the good evening, here's the news. This Walter Cronkite stuff from 1975. People know what the news is. You might do just a quick, here's the news, but then to me, take some time and do some in-depth stuff and do some interesting stuff. If you don't, we're going to die. So it's just a challenge we all have.
No, I like it because it's an idea. And it's different, and
and again, what works for your market, Aubrey, what might be radically different than mine. And
they might not even let me do anything like that. I'm just saying, but I like it because it's different, and it's an idea. It's But no, you're right, because the younger generation, they don't sit down and watch the news, you know, before, after they eat dinner like we did, you know, back in the 70s and 80s and when we were growing up and stuff. It's, you know, things are different now. And I think we have to, you know, we need to realize that. Although I will say that I do like kind of a traditional Walter Cronkite newscast.
Yeah, and by the way, we're going to have to do a quick timeout here, Jen. I know you're hosting the show this evening, but I'm the button presser guy, but due to time restraints, speaking of that late news, I've got to roll some recorded stuff. Kevin, you okay out there?
Hey, I was listening in the background. I just wanted to ask, with you doing other things, and you're obviously a leader in the industry, James, but do you think that the current situation with regard to ownerships and multiple ownerships, are they going to allow us to have any flexibility to try new things? Like, I came in here and our graphical look is mandated by the corporate parent.
I don't know, and I'll be honest with you, I don't know who these people are I'm working for yet. I mean, you know, we're just getting to know each other, and they might come in here in 2 or 3 months and say, this is the way you're going to do it. And we do it across the company. And Sinclair is the largest operator, largest owner of television stations now in the country. They're the clear channel of television. I don't know. I'll find out here as the months go by. I would imagine by the next ratings book, which is in February, we'll find out what they're going to do. But for the moment, we're still free to do whatever we want to.
Well, and I ask it of you rhetorically because I know the situation that you're in, and I put it out there to everybody, especially the broadcasters who listen, because, you know, I just came from a Gannett station or a Gannett group that used to be BLO, but as that transition was happening, Gannett is now mandating all graphics come out of one location in Denver. And what that's going to do is stifle creativity. When you've got to try and push a lot of stuff, or even just the little ideas, you have to push them up this big giant hill to some corporate parent who's in a different town and not listening to you and trying to send stuff, generic stuff that's not market specific, back down. It's really, really difficult. And I hope that those of us who can will be able to push back on that a little bit.
Yeah, that's creepy. That's very creepy. I mean, if I'm under some mandate from some guy in Baltimore, you have to do these graphics and do it this way, and it's the way it is everywhere. I've said this before. You have to understand the culture of the market. Every market is different, and I think that's a horrible thing. But again, in order to save time here, Jen, hang on. We got to roll some audio. Absolutely. And when I'm through rolling audio, y'all can sit on here and talk all night if you want to. But we're going to pause for Professor Peters. We've got the Astronomy Outlook with Tony Rice. We've got Nate's News. We'll do email, picks of the week, weather roundup. You name it, we've got it as WeatherBrains rolls along.
WeatherBrains 101 with Professor Peters.
There are stationary fronts, warm fronts, and cold fronts. But what the heck is this thing called an occluded front? An occluded front is formed during the process of cyclogenesis, the development or strengthening of an area of low pressure or cyclone, when a cold front overtakes a warm front. Where this occurs, the warm air is separated or occluded from the center of the cyclone. The point where the warm front, the cold front, and the occluded front meet is often referred to as the triple point. Occluded fronts usually form around mature low-pressure areas. There are 2 types of occlusions, warm occlusion and cold occlusion. In a cold occlusion, the air mass overtaking the warm front is cooler than the cool air ahead of the warm front and plows under both air masses. In a warm occlusion, the air mass overtaking the warm front is not as cool as the cold air ahead of the front and rides over the colder air mass while lifting the warm air. On a weather map, an occluded front is shown by a line with both spikes taken from a cold front symbol alternated with half moons taken from the warm front symbol on the same side of the line. This is similar to but different from the stationary front symbol, which has triangles on one side and the half moons on the opposite side of the line. In most cases, the low-pressure storm system will slowly begin to dissipate once occlusion occurs, since the warm air source is being cut off from the center of the storm. If you have a weather question, drop an email to question@weatherbrains.com.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, I'm Tony Rice with your Astronomy Outlook for the week of November 24th. Mars will be easy to find midweek. Look to the waxing crescent moon after sunset for your guide. On Tuesday, the red planet will be to the left, and on Wednesday it will be beneath the moon. Thursday marks the moon reaching perigee, or the closest point in its orbit to the Earth, about 230,000 miles away. Super waxing crescent moon doesn't seem to have the same ring to it, I guess. If your Black Friday morning will be spent looking for bargains in a pre-dawn line outside a big box store, take a moment to look to the southwestern sky for the winter triangle. 3 bright stars which can outshine even parking lot lights. Astronomers refer to these prominent stars by their Arabic or Greek names. The leftmost star in the triangle is Sirius, just 8 light years away. It's the brightest in our sky, other than the sun, of course. Its name comes from the Greek for bright or glowing. Sirius lies at the shoulders of the constellation Canis Major. The other 2 stars in this triangle lie in the constellation Orion, the Great Hunter. Down and to the right is the slightly bluish Rigel, Arabic for foot of the Great One. Above that is the orangey Betelgeuse. There's some disagreement on where that name comes from. It's probably not very accurate, but what I tell kids when I'm volunteering at public observing sessions is it means the armpit of the Great One. That's your astronomy outlook. You can follow me on Twitter at RTPHokey for more spacey stuff like this.
All the news under the sun. I'm meteorologist Nate Johnson with your WeatherBrains news update. First story comes to us from Brad Travis, chief meteorologist at WAFF Channel 48 in Huntsville, Alabama, talking about an issue that we see with a lot of radars across the country. They're pointing their fingers specifically at the radar at Columbus Air Force Base in Mississippi and trees blocking the radar beam. Had a couple of storms roll through on October 13th, and according to National Weather Service meteorologist Chris Darden, look like that the tree blockage may have delayed their warning for a tornado. Still had the warning out with a positive lead time there, but some concerns, according to a local emergency management director, saying that that might have caused some problems there. A couple of ways to fix that, of course, would be, raising the radar dish. Might also be cutting down some trees, that sort of thing. Those are going to be some issues that they'll have to look through. Unfortunately, a sad story out of Huntsville, Alabama. Longtime Huntsville broadcaster and weathercaster Adrian Gibson died. He had been working in the market for 5 decades plus and had done just about everything you can do, including being the news director, which is the big boss of the newsroom, including the Weather Center. He's also been an anchor, a reporter, and finished his career doing weather at WAAY, Channel 31 in Huntsville. Our condolences to the Gibson family and to all of his colleagues and friends and viewers there on the loss. And finally tonight, news of a little bit of an upgrade from the GFS model, getting a big upgrade coming up. The new model running currently in parallel with the old one, and you can get that information from a number of different sources, including Weather Bell, Tropical Tidbits, and other places. Very interesting that the newer, more 13-kilometer resolution GFS had a very different look on the snowstorm that's likely to affect the northeastern part of the country. We've been following it here in the southeast very closely. The old GFS was talking big snow here in central North Carolina. The new GFS wouldn't hear about it. Very interesting to see how this will play out as we roll toward a newer GFS. That's all the news. If you have any additional items you'd like to send us for consideration, shoot them to us. Email at weatherbrains.com, or you can tweet me. I am NSJ on Twitter.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
All right, we're doing the show on November 24th. We are a day or two away from an East Coast snow problem, and Dr. John Scala is our East Coast correspondent. John, who gets the snow? Who gets the rain? How bad is it going to be for travelers?
Well, Aubrey and I are both going to get this one. It's going to be coming in from the south. Looks like it'll be here before sunrise. That is, crossing the Maryland-Pennsylvania state line before sunrise. I think the axis of the heavy snow will run from Hagerstown, probably right up through central PA to the northeast, up towards Allentown, northwestern New Jersey, and then into central New England. I think we're going to see 4 to 6 inches here where I live in Lancaster County. And as you move towards the northeast, could be 6 to 10 inches. And then as you get up towards New England, it's a big event for those guys.
How about Boston?
Oh, yeah, but I think they're going to be closer to the water. So they may see a mix. I think at that point, you got to go towards Springfield maybe in central Mass, and head up towards Nashua, up into New Hampshire.
And I think every high school marching band within 100 miles of me is in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. It must be all bands from the Deep South. What about Midtown Manhattan there?
Same idea. I think they're too far east, but it'll be kind of a messy deal.
Yeah, either way.
It should be over by Thursday morning, right, for them?
Yeah, that's right. But it's the idea. They're going to have to travel there on Wednesday, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's why I'm more concerned, to be honest, with Wednesday night.
Yeah.
With the freezing and stuff, however much comes down. I mean, granted, even if people traveled this past Sunday anywhere in the Mid-Atlantic or kind of the southeast to the Carolinas, eastern Tennessee, even just the rain, constant, you're talking constant for 4, 6, 8 hours, whatever you're driving, that was a pain, and that was just rain. So, whatever it is, it's not going to be fun driving, and I'm still concerned with Wednesday night, really, with the cold and what roadways being the biggest threat for many areas.
What about the big airports, Aubrey and John, Washington, Philadelphia, New York City, Boston? What can travelers expect?
Well, the I-95 corridor is going to be out where the changeover is.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably a mix right along the I-95. If you're east and south of I-95, it's primarily a rain event.
Yeah.
Do you think the rain for those big airports will cause a lot of delays? Or I've not flown through there on the day before Thanksgiving with rain or snow.
I used to fly a lot with Chili's the day before Thanksgiving. That was always the day they sent us home, and I never had a problem. But, I think the one big thing with this system is it doesn't look like it's going to be very windy with a lot of this. It looks like a lot of the wind is really going to stay mainly along the coast or offshore.
Yeah, I think you're right. In fact, we have more wind today than we're going to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there will be low cloud decks, low visibilities due to precipitation. So they're going to have to separate the aircraft. And
you're going to have icing,
there'll be icing issues. There's going to be delays. There's no question.
Okay, well, let me do this now. I'm going to have to do some out-of-whack stuff here because of time. I'm going to do the fog bank a little out of order here. This is from Skydiver. This involves picks of the week. Then I'm going to come back and play a little audio from Tarmo, our friend in Estonia, and that'll lead to the email segment. I just love hearing this guy talk. But this is the Skydiver and the fog bank.
Initiating startup sequence.
Hello, WeatherBrains listeners. This is Skydiver with Fog Bank. My first pick comes from an Earth Science picture of the day with undulatus asperatus clouds over Guatemala. Dr. Shepard's Weather Geeks this week was really great, talking about, and I wish I could do sound effects, the polar vortex. Brendan Loy had some fantastic, scathing tweets about the stupidity that emanated from New York Governor Cuomo's mouth after the Buffalo snowstorm. Go look those up. NOAA's Environmental Visualization Laboratory has some great tools to play around with. The British Antarctic Survey published a survey of Antarctic sea ice done with a robotic submarine that used an upward-looking sonar. And finally, I'm not sure who first put this out on Twitter, but it's a beautiful photo. I think it's from the Canary Islands. Fog spilling out of an elevated valley. Thanks for listening. Skydiver out.
Initiating shutdown sequence.
Hello, WeatherBrains. This is Tarmo Danilso from Laguia, Estonia. Apologize for my voice quality. I have a cold. Last week, Nate pointed out that there is some Morse code hidden in the news theme that I made for his news segment. Indeed, that's true. But the Morse code isn't necessarily where you might think it is. In this segment, I will now take this theme music apart and show you where exactly this Morse code is. First, I'm going to fade out all the audio tracks that are irrelevant. Here it is. Still not getting it? Okay, let's slow it down by 4 times. And split the components. And there is it. NSJ, WX, and news. Not to mention music brains, here's an update on what are we expecting weather-wise tomorrow. Tomorrow, according to the forecast from the Estonian Weather Service, it will be mostly cloudy with occasional precipitation, mostly sleet and rain. And take note, our sleet is not your sleet. Winds will be blowing south from 5 to 11 meters per second. High temperature from -1 to +2 degrees Celsius. In the islands up to 4 degrees Celsius. And with that from Lago Estonia, this was Tarmo Danilso. Now I'm back to bed, binge watching AMS Severe Local Storms conference videos and hoping I get better soon.
We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
Oh, gotta love Tarmo. Wait, am I on mute? Am I on mute? No, I'm not on mute. Okay, that was good. Nate was able to pick out that there was Morse code in there?
Yeah, that's a little weird. That's a little weird.
What is that? Wow. Okay, so not much in the email inbox. Apparently, I guess since I was out last week, people decided not to send any emails. We did get an email from Daniel Lucas from WAFF about the Huntsville broadcaster Adrian Gibson, who passed away at age 78. I believe he retired in 2004. So a beloved meteorologist. And let's see, Daniel Lucas, Nate included that. And then we got a comment on our video on WeatherBrains from Emerald Phoenix. Gotta love that name. Really good show. I love the change in topic to space since, yes, it does overlap with weather concerns. Great guest. Got a lot out of the talk about the evacuation out of Houston. Seemed to like it. So we thank you for your comments, and I believe that is all that we have. So if you have an email or a question or a guest suggestion or maybe an idea that you would like to send us, or maybe a fun article that you saw, go ahead and email it to us, email@weatherbrains.com. You can also find us on the Facebook or the Twitter. Just search for WeatherBrains, and also you can find our website. Just go to www.weatherbrains.com, and then we are also each on the Twitter and the Facebook. You can follow us all individually. Maybe you'd like a forecast out of Pennsylvania, out of Oklahoma, out of Texas, out of Alabama, or out of Virginia.
I guess we're looking for a host now, huh? Since our virtual host has disappeared.
Who's hosting the show?
Yeah. I guess we're drawing straws now for who's going to host the rest of it. Kevin, you want to take a shot at it?
No, I can't. But I came in to do a pick of the week. Can I do that?
Yes.
Do your pick, Kevin.
I want to pick Rick Smith because he's going to turn Wichita Falls into an upper air site. Thanks. I gotta go. See you guys.
Well, if you're lucky, he'll just make your own weather service down there, the Wichita Falls Weather Service, Kevin. So anyway.
Maybe Cuomo can help me with that. That's not.
You should write him. He's on a roll right now. Right. So
the way things go in the Weather Service, everything goes in cycles. So someday somebody's going to have a bright idea. Why don't we put a bunch of small offices in places? And yeah, Wichita Falls used to have an office.
Oh, no kidding. That's interesting.
Yep.
Outstanding.
Sorry to interrupt. I'll see you guys.
No, thanks, Kevin. Well, we'll continue with that vein, and that's a good segue to Rick for your pick of the week. Rick, how about you?
My pick of the week was just changed in the last 25 seconds.
It was amazing adaptability there. I like that.
I was actually listening and paying attention. So I forgot. My original pick is evergreen, so I can say that for another time. But the American Meteorological Society just had their Severe Local Storms Conference the first week in November, and they did an amazing turnaround and already got a lot of those presentations and posters published online. So I know I put together a list for all of my mailing list at the office and sent out my the ones I really recommended watching. There's some great stuff in there. It's some of it is quite technical and quite deep, and then some of the radar meteorology and other things, but there's some great stuff there. So you'll find that link up on the website.
Outstanding. Way to be flexible there, Rick, and a great pick. We'll continue down the line with Dr. John Scala. Dr. Scala, what's your pick? And do you want to change it at the last second like Rick? Call an audible, John.
I should ask if Brian needs a pick.
There you go. The source of picks.
Well, actually, I do have two again, but they relate to each other. And watching the developments in Western New York, having lived there, and I know the Weather Service office in Buffalo, so I was really taken aback by Cuomo's comments. So my first pick is his comment from his initial news conference that was held in Cheektowaga. And he made the statement that the Weather Service did not indicate that the heavy snow bands would remain stationary and blast South Buffalo. No one had an idea that this was going to happen. The Weather Service was way off. And so, by the way, in my state, we're putting in our own weather detection system. And then he followed that up by backtracking a little bit and said, well, no, they didn't do such a bad job, but they only have a certain number of weather stations and they need more. That's my second pick.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll continue with the political controversy stirring the pot like we do so well here on WeatherBrains every week. So thank you for that pick, John. Continuing down the line, Jen was in early this afternoon with her pick, and we appreciate that, Jen.
No, my pleasure. I'm going to pitch a website that I actually was part of helping create because I believe in it so strongly. It's called the Disaster Collaboratory, and it's a hub where researchers and people involved in disaster management can share ideas and experiences. And we're looking for communities who are interested in partnering with researchers to conduct, surveys or interviews or on-the-ground kind of research. And likewise, researchers who are interested in partnering with different communities to help us better understand disasters. So we have a partnership board that people can sign up with different ideas and projects that they have, and we try to match people together from academic communities with on-the-ground folks. So.
Well, it's really been fun getting to know you, Jen. We thank you for what you do, and we really thank you for what you've done on the show tonight. This has been outstanding. I'm glad you came up with this idea. If you remember, it came from you and I having about a 90-minute conversation prior to your first visit, and it ended up that you were asking me all the questions. So,
I know. You guys are fascinating.
It was good. So thank you very much for all the research and efforts you put into tonight, and it's been a pleasure. And we're going to be excited to kick it back off here in a minute. And I hear we're going till midnight. That's the goal, but I don't know if we'll achieve that or not. But thank you for what you did tonight, Jim. And Brian Peters just wants to throw up at that idea because he has his bedtime at 9:55, and he hates when we go past 10 o'clock.
So Brian, we're already 5 minutes past my bedtime.
Well, once you get to 10, you might as well stay till 10:35 till Span gets back. So
there's a couple of us in the Eastern time zone in case you lost track of it.
Yeah. I can appreciate that.
That's your problem, not ours.
Oh, there you go, Rick. There you go.
My pick of the week is a tip of the hat to John Scala for getting me out of the pick of the week foghorn the last couple of weeks. But this week I have my own pick, John.
Great.
I'm going to continue this theme of snow. And I know this has been picked before, but it's one I use a lot during the winter, and it's the National Snow Survey. And gives you the latest information about how much snow is on the ground out there. So I'll put that in the show notes.
Outstanding. Thanks for the great job you do on the webpage every week, Brian. We were commenting on the chat internally there a few minutes ago, and really appreciate what you do every week. 'Cause that's one of the hardest jobs on the whole show is keeping all of our picks and all of our guest information together, especially when you get it at 5 minutes of 8 every night on Monday night. Sorry about that, Brian.
Yes, and I've declared that making picks changes makes me even crankier.
Oh, well, there you go. So everybody change your picks. Aubrey, here's your chance. Change your pick real quick.
I just said, well, just add a second pick for them instead of changing it. Make it easy on Brian. My pick was, what was my pick? Oh, spaceweather.com. This ginormous sunspot. It's the biggest sunspot in like 24 years, and it's now facing the Earth. So the big question is, does it erupt? So you can check on those updates for spaceweather.com, and they always have some really great pictures on there. I've posted that website before, but they always have new information at the top, and it's just a great website.
Well, that is a great pick, and Aubrey, thanks for giving me something else to worry about now. So anyway, now I have to watch the sunspot. So thanks a bunch.
And how does it affect the winter storm?
That's right, in the polar vortex. But anyway,
millions in the past.
Yeah, millions, billions in the past. Exactly.
Dangerous sunlight.
So anyway, I'll go over some of the guests coming up. Thanks to Jen tonight for a fantastic show, turning the tables on us. We appreciate that. Paul Enriquez next week from the National Weather Service in Hanford talking about the California drought. And when you think about California, you think about a lot of weather things, but you know what's one of the most serious weather factors they face out there? Any ideas, panelists?
Wind?
Fog. Fog.
Ah.
Fog in the San Joaquin Valley, one of the biggest threats. They have a lot of fatalities, because of that.
True.
And Paul's done a ton of work on that.
The marine
Exactly. So I had never even heard of, I think it's called Tool Fog, Tule. So I think it's going to be a fascinating show next week. And we've also got Joseph Rentgen, who has a fascinating teleconnection that he's going to talk to us about, that he's been wanting to get on the show for several weeks and talk about. On the 8th of December, Catherine Miles and Gary Satkowski will be with us. On the 15th, we'll take sort of a Tulsa bent with James Adelight from KOKI. He's going to talk about the Broken Arrow tornado from last year. Shelby Hayes, one of our favorite guest panelists, is going to join us that night, too, and tell us about her new job. And we're excited to have her on again. Jesse Harrow from the National Weather Service in El Paso on the 22nd. And some of these dates may change because of our virtual host, James. I don't know what his vacation schedule is. But, of course, on the 29th of December, we'll welcome our regular end-of-the-year guest, which is Greg Carbon, the WCM from the SPC. And he will fill in the end of the meteorological memories that he did at the National Weather Association meeting out in Salt Lake. And I can guess what one of those is. Any ideas, John Scala, what number 11 might be, or whatever the last entry on the list
would it have
is?
something to do with snow?
I bet it might have something to do with that, for sure. Now, I've got a pick in here somewhere, and thanks to Greg for it. It is the wonder, and I guess Greg had to do it. There's probably other forecasters at the SPC that either collaborated or may have been responsible for it, and that's the outstanding SPC sounding Climo page, and a lot of great information on that. And I saw that come through some feed this week, and I was amazed at it. Rick, any comments about that cool site?
No, it's amazing. It seems like every other week there's new stuff on the SPC site, the Climo page, and they're always working. They do amazing work over there, and yeah, there's some great stuff there for sure.
Yeah, it really is incredible. So I'm going to turn the floor back over to you, Jen, and let you take us on back to until Span comes back. So any of the panelists, if you can stay up late tonight. Brian, you looking a little sleepy over there, or are you going to make it?
I'm going to have to cut out. Sorry about that.
I knew. All right, Brian. All right, we'll have breakfast next week, Brian. So, Jen, the floor is yours. Take us away.
Okay. Well, could I just shift to a couple, I guess, a topic I'm interested in. I just mentioned that I was part of this extreme climate change, engineering for extreme climate change workshop. Now, coming into the weather community, I was not aware that climate researchers and weather researchers do two totally different things. And because I always thought climate and weather were so interrelated, how could you talk about them separately? But they get talked about separately all the time. And I find it to be such an interesting political divide, an interesting scientific divide, in terms of how people approach these two different areas of research. So I'm wondering, can you talk to me a bit about the controversies of climate change and how this discussion relates to you all with weather? I mean, how does the weather community think about how climate relates to their day-to-day life? I know that the difference between the two, but you want to talk about this, or is that too hot to handle?
No, we're just glad Span's not here because we'd be getting the foghorn right now for this. But anyway.
Oh, does he not talk about climate change? Okay.
No, that's okay. While he's gone, we can talk about anything. So,
Yeah.
So who wants to take a stab at that?
I'll pass.
Okay.
John, your last chance here for a little controversy on
even
Monday
historically, could somebody explain to me how these two lines of research got so separated?
I think it's strictly political, Jen. I think everybody's retreated to their corners over the last few years because of it, and it's kind of a shame because it may be a dangerous thing. It's just talking about, like, even with Paul next week. Drought in California is really, really serious now. Drought in Rick's area and obviously in Kevin's area has been, extremely catastrophic. And, this may be a long-term weather, pattern. These areas, to me, my idea is that they may have been settled in a wetter time. And just because of natural cycles and natural oscillations, we may be putting, large parts of our civilization at risk by not considering this information, whether it's, whether it is man-made, climate change or whether it is just natural oscillations in the pattern. I think we're doing ourselves a disservice by not looking at it closely.
Yeah, Bill, I would agree with you. There's a couple of things going on. In the Southwest, the rapid growth that occurred about 20 years ago in places like Nevada and Arizona, that was during an anomalously wet period.
Exactly.
All the growth that occurred in South Florida occurred during a time when there was a downturn in tropical cyclone activity. And now that we see these cycles changing, we've put a large percentage of the population in those areas at risk. So there is a definite interaction between changes in climate and our demographics.
Well, and I'm also struck by, in this particular conference, talking about extreme climate change was talked about as extreme weather events. So there was an overlap expressly sort of made where if you're talking about, it was in Boulder, so they were talking about the flash flooding along the Front Range last year and the significance of that flooding. And this community was talking about it in terms of, adapting to climate variability or climate change, but it was also being talked about in the weather community as this example of, severe weather that needs to be understood in terms of its effect on populations. So I saw this overlap in terms of just talking about the events, which is interesting because I think that that's maybe a way that the communities can sort of talk together because they're talking about the same event, but I don't know. It's I'm always surprised by the highly politically charged nature of these conversations because people always assume, from my perspective, when they don't understand what I do, they say, "Oh, I know climate people. I could, and I'm like, no, you don't understand. That's not the weather community." And I have to make that very clear to them. So it's an interesting political conversation.
There's a lot of interest, Jen, right now that any extreme weather event, could it be tied to a climate change?
Right. And I know that that's,
There's a lot of focus right now on that, and the public in particular likes to pick up on that because they'll hear a political figure make a statement, or they'll read something in the media or hear something in the media, and they immediately think there's this causal relationship that's taking place. For example, Mayor Bloomberg in New York City, after Hurricane Sandy devastated that area, told the residents of New York City, "You got to be ready for this every year." That's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous statement to make. There was a statistical study done by some scientists in Rutgers a year after Sandy, which concluded that the turn of events that led to that left-hand turn that Sandy made due to the blocking height of the north, well, it has a recurrence interval of once every 700 years. What they need to worry about in New York City and along many stretches of the coastline is rising sea level. Every nor'easter now has the potential to produce flooding because sea levels are higher. So it's an emotionally charged issue, and we need to get back from that and just talk about the data. What is the data showing us? Let's remove emotions from this, and let's just say scientifically sound.
Good question, Jen, and it was a good time to ask it too.
Oh, I didn't. Unbeknownst to me, I did not realize that was a good time. So,
if you got any more climate change ones, you better get them in quick.
No, that was the only one. I guess the other question that is maybe, I don't know if it's sensitive or not, but I recently attended at the National Weather Association the Women's Luncheon, which is, I think, in its third year. And I know that I noted that that's a new development, and I'm curious, with Laura Fergione being on Weather Geeks the last week or the week before, talking about gender and meteorology, and I'm just curious about the role of women in broadcasting and meteorology, and kind of your all's perspective historically or even contemporarily on women in meteorology and kind of the challenges in the future of that particular topic.
Sounds like that question was made for Aubrey.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know if I can really answer it well because I mean I've been doing this for only 4 years now. The area that I interned in had all male meteorologists at both the station I interned at and the competing station. Oh no, they did have one female, but now they're all back to all male. It does seem, when I go to the National Weather Service office for the workshops, I do feel like I'm the only female in there at times, and then one or two, might straggle in. It's definitely feels more male dominant. I don't. I don't know. What is your guys' perspective as how it's changed over time?
My perspective is from the research community. When I finished my PhD, I went to work at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, and I worked with Joanne Simpson, who was the first woman to receive a PhD in meteorology. She told many stories about the struggles that she went through at the University of Chicago when she first went there to pursue a PhD, and they told her, some very high-powered individuals told her, now you should be back home in the kitchen, you shouldn't be out getting a PhD. And she actually wrote a paper about her experiences as a research scientist in a field that's male-dominated.
I do think there are struggles being taken seriously sometimes, and I guess personally I don't feel the struggle as much, but I see it in other female broadcasters that I know. And I don't know if it's just demographic in a certain area or what it is that their personality relates differently, but you know, I do see it, and some of the the social media comments, you know, there are some things that I think a lot of people would say to a woman that they wouldn't dare say to a male meteorologist.
Like what's an example of that, Aubrey?
Well,
and to maintain our PG rating, please.
Yeah, well, I think clothing for one. You know, just simply asking, you know, maybe I had white flour the day before, which, you know, I typically don't eat, and, you know, you might get a comment of, are you pregnant? You know, and it's just, you know, things that you would never say to a male meteorologist, you know, whereas a female, sometimes people would notice if, you know, you do gain the slightest little bit of weight, whereas a male, you know, they don't notice that.
Well, I forgot where it was. It may have even been in another country, but this recent thing where the male, it was Australia, yeah, where the male anchor wore the same exact suit for a year, every newscast, to just kind of demonstrate how unfair it is that female anchors, people on television, are so much more scrutinized about, didn't you wear that 2 weeks ago, or, you know, that doesn't make you look good, or it's not flattering. I've talked to some of the meteorologists around here, and it's just, I can't imagine people having I can't imagine, and it's very sad that.
I think the women scrutinize the women more.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we still live in a sexist world to some degree. I don't know if y'all saw that PSA where they, you know, walked a model through New York City with some sort of camera, and counted how many comments they got from, you know, males, and it's that way in all places around the world, I'm sure. But still, those are the vestiges that we need to go. You'd like to think that the glass ceilings are gone and that, you know, all these things are out in the professional workplace, but, you know, there are probably some elements of them still out there in all areas, unfortunately. So I know Christina Crow and all the group that did the Women in Meteorology luncheon at the NWA. I think the first one may have been in Birmingham in 2011.
I think it was.
I think that thing's really grown and become something else. And this year they actually wanted men to come to it.
Yeah.
And so it was a really big deal, Dan.
Yeah. No, and I think also it's interesting to me that the meteorology is one of the STEM fields, and so there's a huge push to, you know, encourage young girls to go into science through the STEM community, and so you're starting to see more women enter meteorology programs as they're pushing for this thing. And my 9-year-old niece, some of you may have met her. She came with me to the National Weather Association. Was so excited to be there. Couldn't wait to meet, you know, real scientists, and was so excited to go trick or treating at the vendor tables for all the different treats. So I do think there's a real opportunity to change the sort of demographics of meteorology as we go forward. And I don't know if you're all seeing that trend, but I know that, like within the National Weather Service, there are more women joining the ranks at the intern level and sort of making their way up through the service. So
I was going to say I've definitely seen that in my weather service career, an increase. It's still not nearly enough, but we have It used to just be the secretary or the administrative assistant was the only female in a Weather Service office, but now we have most of our student volunteers from the University of Oklahoma that we have are females. We have 2 female forecasters, and we've had lots of interns. So it's getting better, but still a long way to go.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of a historical question that's interesting to me. And Bill and Brian has gone, and I know some of you are history buffs. I think that history teaches us a lot about weather, and I'm curious. I guess Bill, maybe this is more directed at you, but you study a lot of history. So, what are some of the lessons that, like studying weather history, or some of the things that you've noticed that history can teach us about sort of how to practice weather communication, or how to think about weather today? What are some of the lessons that you think history offers?
Well, I think it's amazing. I look back this weekend over 865 pages of weather history, and so no event ever really amazes me, because I've got 20 to 30 events per day over time that tell you that whatever the terrible thing that CNN is covering, or that the Weather Channel says is the biggest, worst, most horrible ever, is nothing like the one that happened in 1936, or
right.
This really happened in 1898, or whatever. When you really look at it, weather history is really amazing, and there are many, many black swan events, hidden in all of that. And now that we have such good analogs, I think we can begin to think about, relating the weather forecast as we see it to what our audiences may have experienced in the past, and it's so powerful. It's one thing to say, well, we're expecting, 6 to 7 inches of snow or whatever, but then you say, this is just like the snow that we had in 1997. They remember that, and it resonates with them, and they remember that it caused tremendous impacts, and maybe that will, goad them into taking, some sort of action. I got in huge trouble, not in huge trouble, but I got in trouble and had my blog post pulled before the January 2012 tornadoes that hit Jefferson County in Alabama on a Sunday night, early Monday morning, because I went, here was a perfect analogy to me. That Sunday night, that Sunday had been the anniversary of the deadliest January tornado in Alabama history. It killed, 30 people in a town called Moundville in Hale County back in the early 20th century. So, I dug up a nice, picture of that and told this, narrative story about this tornado and posted it on the blog, and within an hour I got a call from James, said I had to take your blog post down. He said, you're scaring people, and the TV station's gotten 500 calls that you're scaring people. I was like, wait a minute, that was the whole point, was not to scare them, but to remind them that we can have terrible tornadoes in January in Alabama, and that you need to really take this event seriously. So when one young girl lost her life and another man in western Jefferson County lost his life that night, it sort of underscored to me that, we don't need to just cave to the pressure. We need to learn from those events, because we weren't hyping, we knew it was going to be serious. And so, that story told it better than anything else to me, was to tell that weather history story. So I think we can use that powerfully. And a lot of Weather Service offices do that, and a lot of broadcasters do that, and it sure is fun for me to do it too.
Mm-hmm.
So, Janet, maybe just you and I here. If John bugs out on schedule like he said, and Rick's battery goes dead, we might be...
No, that's okay. We can wrap up. That's totally fine. It's getting late.
So, anything else you want to ask Dr. Scala or Rick before they turn into pumpkins?
No, you guys have been great. It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
This is a lot of fun, and we joked in the chat about doing part 2, but I don't think we were really joking. I think it'd be cool to do this again. I think it's great to do this. So thanks for all your work and for being here.
No, and I I'll just say thanks to the audience who all sent me questions that they wanted to have asked.
Some great stuff.
Yeah,
yep, some great stuff.
Well, I guess since we don't have anything else to talk about, we'll put this show in the books. And does anybody else have anything else they want to add before we go?
Oh, Bill, just one thing. The State College, the Weather Service office up there, asked me to join their IWT. So we're going to be having,
there you go.
Our first meeting here before too long, and I'm going to take Rick's comments to heart and say, guys, let's make sure once we get this started, we communicate regularly.
Well, that's outstanding. I think that was a screaming message from Keith Stellman last week too, when we had him on the show. So there's a lot to learn there.
And
so
Jim, we'll be
anyway,
in touch soon regarding IWT activities. So haven't forgotten. So.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited to hear what you have to say and to follow up with that.
All right, cool. Thanks.
well, if that's it, I'll go ahead and wrap us up. But of course, WeatherBrains is the weekly netcast about the weather. We usually record this show Monday nights at 8:30 Central. Big Brains Media, James's company, is the group that puts it together. J.P. Spann, James's son, puts a lot of work into this show every week. And, of course, you can hear us in a lot of ways. You can subscribe on iTunes or on Stitcher. You can watch us live on Google Plus or at the BigBrainsMedia.com site as it's recorded. You can go back on YouTube and watch us. It's a great way to do it. And there's always the WeatherBrains website that Brian, as we bragged about tonight, does such a good job processing each week. Or just, search for us, for WeatherBrains on any of these aforementioned platforms, and you'll find us. So if you got guest suggestions, comments, links, rants, any kind of email, we love it. Email at weatherbrains.com. It gets to all of us. And we love those comments on iTunes and Stitcher. So please tell us what you think about the show. So until next Monday night, when our guest weather brain will be Paula Niquez, this is guest booking officer Bill Murray saying good night and God bless.
Good night.
And
thanks, Jen.
That's it. Thank you, Jen. Great job.
Thank you, guys. I
Thanks,
appreciate
Rick.
it.
Thanks, John. Y'all make it through the storm.
Yes, sir. We'll be in
Happy
touch.
Thanksgiving.
Good night.
All right. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye.
Oh, yeah. So we're the only two guys left. Me and Kev. This is good.
This sounds dangerous to me.
Yeah, we're actually doing this while we're on television. This is great.
We were delayed. I guess NBC broke away or paused prime time for the Ferguson stuff, and so we're like 10 minutes behind tonight.
Yeah, we are too. I just finished doing the weather.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, and we're about to start sports, so I thought I'd come back here and see if anybody was still around. So
yeah, so I'm interrupting your time alone with everyone because I know this.
No, I have nothing to. I have nothing to report. I'm going to let you do the time alone.
And reflect.
I mean, you need to air it out because you'll be through and you can say whatever you want to say.
Well, you know what? You need to tell me what happened this summer with the FCC, because I was off the air for that period of time. Did they come through there and say that you got to write everything down and it's got to be printed out and everything's in the prompter? Did y'all have that?
We have like a service that does that on the fly.
Oh, okay.
We pay some company and they transcribe it on the fly, and
right.
It's a paid deal. But they're not here. I don't know where they are, but they do it on. They just watch us on the internet. And
it's sponsored. So you're paying them, or are some sponsors paying?
No, I don't know. I mean, but I know that they're getting paid cash by us. Now, whether we monetize it with some kind of sponsorship, I don't know.
I imagine. Well, see, because I did not go through that. I was off the air during the summer, and what it is here is that everything, every tease, every promo, every little segment has to have prompting on it, and so you spend half your day typing up what it is you're going to say on TV, and it's quite different.
That's what kills Song of the Night, our little fun feature in the breaks. We had to do closed captioning. And
oh, you're kidding.
No, we had to do closed captioning for Song of the Night.
Well, it doesn't make any sense to me in the weather because, I mean, you're just being redundant of what the visuals are. I mean, I can understand maybe typing a sentence or two, but it can't be more than that because what are you going to say? Well, here's the temperature that you can already see? I don't understand that. What is the FCC's point in this?
It makes no sense.
Oh, okay.
I got to get back in there.
All right, I got to go too.
All right.
I'll try and spend some more time next week.
All right, bye. We're turning the show off. Bye. You have a good week. Bye.